Go.
Sure.
Okay, cool. So everybody, today I'm speaking with Yusuf Ponders, who's a popular YouTuber in the Islamic sort of uh, niche. And he also has a blog called ponderingsoul.blog. So welcome, Yusuf. Thank you so much for being here.
No, thank you for having me. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam. So yeah, maybe for people who don't know you, I'm pretty sure that a lot of people know you, but for people who don't know you, could you give us like a bit of a background into, how did you become a Muslim? Because obviously you're a revert, and you're not a born Muslim. So maybe just a short version of how did that happen if you're coming from a Christian background or atheism
Yeah.
or something like that.
Yeah, so I come from Christian background, specifically a Catholic one. So mum's a Polish Catholic, Eastern European,
That's me.
like yourself. And my father is from Scotland, and he was from a Catholic family as well, but not really as practicing. My Polish side was a lot more so. They love to have the pictures of Pope John Paul II on the wall.
Mhm.
So obviously he was Polish as well, so they were big on that. And so we used to go to church and that when we were younger. Went to Catholic school, went to Sunday school as well, a little Polish one. And at some point, we just kind of stopped being so religious. We stopped going to church. My father passed away when I was about 9. I think that probably motivated like an atheist streak in me, or miso-theist, when I was talking specifically about it. But otherwise, if we were like in general conversation with people, religion was just something we generally mocked or saw as silly. Probably a consequence of even the schooling environment as well. They sort of facilitated that attitude, so to speak. There wasn't really anyone that took religion seriously among our peers or teachers or anything like that. And and so after leaving school, I ended up working in a restaurant, and I had a few friends there, same age as me, but they were also from a Muslim background. And it was the first time I managed to really talk to people about Islam. So I had Muslims in and out of my life, but we never really spoke religion. And the whole 9/11 thing had kicked off while I was in high school. And so I remember that happening, and things like obviously rearing up about that. And it was always awkward trying to speak to people about it, because you kind of felt like maybe you were saying something wrong or making them feel uncomfortable. But alhamdulillah, the people that I was speaking to were very patient with me. They let me ask my questions, and they gave their answers. And when they didn't know the answer to a question, they'd say that they would go and look for one. And so I went through the whole spiel. They gave me a Quran. I read through that, and obviously everything that was controversial in there, I was pulling it up, asking them questions, and going through it. And they sort of dispelled any of these sort of typical notions that the Islamic apologist might want to sort of instill in the general public's mind. And so after a while, I became more agnostic, or at least open to the idea that there was such thing as a God, that Muhammad had some sort of communion with this God, that he was in communication with him, and that the book, the Quran, was the word of God, or like to some degree at least. I'm talking years ago now, so I was probably maybe about 18, 19 at the time. So after a little bit, it depended on who I was with as well. So if I was with people who were more religious, I guess I'd be more agnostic or open to the idea. And if I was with atheists, I think if they were mocking it, I wouldn't like stop them from doing that. And if they didn't take it seriously, I wouldn't take it as seriously as well. But I sort of drifted between these ideas of of things being possible or of miraculous in some nature. I don't think I would have had an explicitly Islamic belief, although I did believe that Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam was in contact with God and the Quran was a word of God. I probably still held this notion to a degree that religion was still a notion, or a power thing, controlling the populace and this, that, and the other. So it was, it wasn't by any means an orthodox belief at the very beginning. And I think it was probably more perennial. So, like this idea there's truth in all religions kind of thing. Because I remember there was periods where I was still quite open to things like Buddhism and Hinduism and New Age religion, that a little bit. And eventually I went, did a bit of traveling. I was around like Southeast Asia, stayed in some Buddhist monks, and I was reading some literature on Buddhism and trying to get my head around that. And I got into some of these New Age figures like Ram Dass and Eckhart Tolle.
Yeah.
And so really, really got into that at one point. But then it was just, I don't know, like you go through these stages, I guess. I was in a bit of a hippie stage as well then. So I had like my long hair, then my hippie pants, the tie-dye jumpers and all that. And so I was I guess more susceptible to it. But I guess the more I kind of spoke to people about it, I didn't necessarily have people pointing this out to me, but I've got a habit of sort of looking at the things that I say again, and then sort of getting hit by a bit of cringe or something, and like, what am I on about here? And like, because I've got, I don't know if you can see, like, there's loads of notebooks up here or something. So I used to write diaries, and I would look at the things I was coming out with, and I was like, what am I on about there? Like, there was one point I was like, there's no such thing as good and evil, and I wrote a poem about it. And I think there was someone that was commented on it because I had like this little poetry blog. I don't have anymore. I downloaded all the stuff I put up on there and deleted it. But yeah, so I was having this conversation with someone. I think he may have been religious, but he was like, "What do you mean? There's no such thing as good and evil?" And then I was thinking about it again. I was like, "No, maybe that is a bit silly." And so, like, obviously, you go down the typical path. Like, well, what about things like Holocaust, or like how do you explain some of the worst features in humanity if you say that there is no such thing as evil? And so it's like, no, you're probably right. So I think I changed that poem or something, and I started to sort of, I guess, evolve like Pokemon a bit. And eventually I ended up reading the Quran again and going through that, and looking into the life of the Sahaba and the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and sort of reevaluating that original conversation that I had with my friends, and thinking about it. It's like, no, that I am convinced that this is a special book. It's beyond human capacity. It's speaking to me on levels that other books just don't do for me. And it seems to sort of really tap into the most inner parts of my soul, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And reading about the life of the Prophet Muhammad and the Sahaba was one that I found very touching as well. The things that they went through, their persistence despite the struggles that they went through and the hardship they went through, and their attachment to the religion of Islam. All of this really spoke to me in many ways. And it also coincided a lot with how I'd always understood the Jesus figure, alayhi salam. Being a Catholic, I could never really get this whole Jesus is God, Mary is the mother of God thing. All of these statues that they had in the churches, the statues of saints and the statues of Mary, I'll be pleased with her, and the statues of Jesus alayhi salam. It's like, how do they know Jesus or Mary look like that? Like, do we have like their family photo album somewhere, and they're like using this as reference for these idols? Or like, is this just whoever made the idols best guess at what they think Jesus may have looked like, and it just happened to be a sort of a white European man, and and so they've made it that way? Or like, what's going on? Who is it that everyone's sort of directing their worship towards here? And why do they need to do that? Why not just go straight to the Father? Why not straight to God? Like, why all of this middle stuff? And what do you mean, Mary, the mother of God? Like, how does that even make sense? Was she not created herself? How can someone be the creator of their mother? Like, it sort of doesn't even make sense with the whole conception of what a mother is. Like, so yeah, obviously those are just a number of smaller problems. I think I've probably overkilled a few of the other reasons in many of the other podcasts I've popped up on. But so in general, I was just becoming more and more convinced of the Islamic narrative. It was sort of more in line with my original thinking of what God was in relation to Tawheed. And there was a number of factors pulling me towards Islam, like I guess gravity, like a force bringing me towards it, and then general society, or like the modern secular living, the people that I was sort of having around me at the time. The modern way of life was really pushing me away from it, so it was acting like a repellent. And so I guess it was like a combination of these two forces: the modern world pushing me away from it, Islam bringing me or pulling me towards it, and eventually it just I had to take my shahada. I couldn't resist.
So it sounds like it's been quite a long journey for you, because in my case this wasn't the case. Or I know a lot of people who just read the Quran and next day they took shahada, right? Or some people they take years. So how long was this since the first time you've read the Quran until you took a shahada? It's been like what, 5 years or even
probably
more?
longer. So
Yeah.
I think I got a Quran off my friends when I was like 18, 19.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't take my shahada until 2014.
Why do you
So,
think that's the case? Like because you've mentioned that you were not convinced, but you thought that yes, this book is from is a different book. It's probably some word of God in it, and Muhammad, peace be upon him, is probably had some sort of communication, but you were still sort of not ready to fully go and I would say submit, right?
yeah.
So what do you think was like holding you back?
So probably a number of things. One, I suffer from a lot of self-doubt, I guess. So to a degree, I'd undermine my own ability to sort of reach the truth quite a lot. And so I question that, did I really look into it the best, or blah, blah, blah. And so that was probably one thing that was putting me off. The second thing, and probably the more predominant of the two, was just worrying about how it was going to change my life. And I was going to have to sort of reformat the way I was going to live. There was a lot of things I wanted to do. I still wanted to kind of go traveling and not be sort of held down by a strict moral code. Basically, just get to do what I want when I wanted. And so I guess at that time, when I was younger, I was just looking at it as an inconvenience, and as something that was going to get in the way of my plans. And it's probably not the best reason, I guess.
Yeah.
But it is what it is, and that was one thing that was really preventing me. So I just put it off.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I guess the thing that I wanted to hold on to ended up being more of a poison than anything else. It was just not something that was fulfilling, and there was a yearning in my heart that I was just constantly pointing at the dunya, thinking that might fulfill it. And it turns out that wasn't the way to sort of fill that hole, I guess.
Yeah.
There was another calling that was more fulfilling for that. And
do you remember the moment when you decided, like, okay, I'm gonna do this? Like what was that? Was there a specific like event, or it was just a combination?
Yeah, so I don't know, people generally, well, they expect this sort of eureka moment, like, oh, I've got the day written in my calendar. I've sent it was the 14th of September 1993 or whatever it was. And it wasn't like that for me. So for me, it was like there was a period. I can't remember if it was, I think it was probably early 2014. And there was maybe a few months, and it sort of bleeds through these months in a strange way, in the sense that like I didn't have one particular day that I was like, right, that's it. It was just sort of having this inner dialogue or this back and forth with myself. It's like, but and then sort of feeling like, going through the the conditions, like, do I think that? Yeah. Do I think that? Yeah. Do I think that? Yeah. But and then it was like, well, you kind of already are, but like, why don't you just want to explicitly say it? And then it was like worrying about what people might say, how my family might react, how what am I going to do, or what am I going to say to these friends? How, how do I kind of move forward from that point? What do I say? What about all these awkward conversations that are probably going to have to come up at some point? And so it was just kind of like a fight, an inner fight for over a period. So I don't, and the line, or the explicit line where you would say now he's a Muslim, because of that battle over a period of months, it becomes somewhat arbitrary or a gray area. Like, do you count at the moment that I submit against the worries, or do you say no beforehand when he already admitted? Because it wasn't even a case of like I wasn't in contact with like a Dawah guy. Like, I wasn't speaking to any du'at. So there was no apologist trying to convince me of anything. It was just me on my own, like battling through these ideas in my head. And so I didn't even really know how to take the Shahada properly. So I was just like, I as far as I understood it, it was the conditions. Do you believe in God? Do you believe that Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam is a prophet, and is the Quran the word of God? Those were the three things that at the time was the principal factors as to whether or not I should be considered a Muslim.
Yeah.
And yeah, so it was just a few months of kind of dealing with that in my head.
It sounds pretty similar. I remember I used to have a notification on my calendar like take Shahada next week, and I always put it off, like take Shahada. And I was already like praying 5 times a day. I was already doing everything I was
Oh,
supposed to do,
mashallah.
but I was like, oh, I'm scared to do it. Like but I was already living like a Muslim for like a few months. And I was like, why am I scared? Like, what's happening? And it's just because of those things, as you've mentioned, you know, like even now I wake up, because it's just been a few months. I wake up and I'm like, am I really a Muslim? Like, that's crazy, because I don't know any. I know some Muslims here, obviously, but they're all immigrants. But I don't know any Czech or Slovak Muslim that, is in my kind of age group doing these things. So it's kind of strange, but, I just say, okay, that's
So
it. And
how big is so you've got a mosque nearby, or do you have to go on a mooch to
yeah,
get there?
I have 3 mosques here, and I have a favorite one in the city center where I go often, every day almost. Yeah.
Oh, mashallah. And so the community there, is it quite lively, or
Mm.
do they engage with you a lot, or do you feel like the
Yeah, I
only white
mean,
man in the village when you go in there?
I am the only white man in the village, but they all like me. They've accepted me, and yeah, so it's all good. It's just it's the country. It's not like the UK, right? It's not a multicultural environment. It's not very Islamophobic. Similar to Poland, not that, I wouldn't say that strict, but because Czechs are no Christians, no, they are just atheists. It's the most atheistic country in the world. So
Oh,
um,
really?
yeah, it's the most atheistic country in the world, but they have a lot of churches, which is funny. So
That
uh,
surprised me a lot, because I never imagined anywhere in Eastern Europe being that atheist.
no, it's like 70-80%. So, but it's different. I'm from Slovakia, which is like 80% Catholic, and we used to be one country, Czechoslovakia. It's very complicated, but anyways, it's like not a person I know believes in even God. So, not I'm not even talking about religion. Just the concept of God is strange here, right? It's like Estonia is also a similar country like that, where you don't really need God in your life if you live there, because the society is set up that you don't even think about that much. People don't really talk
Yeah.
about it. It's just something you do if you want to do it, but you're weird. So yeah, it's
Yeah, you
just,
always imagine when I was a teenager, whenever you think religious person, you always think the crazy Bible person
yeah,
that would be
exactly.
like
Like
stood on the corner screaming like and talking in a strange way, like not in like in English, but not like in like when people talk English, the standard way that people have a discussion is not the way that someone that stood there with the Bible speaks. There was something always very strange about it.
yeah. And with the Christianity, I remember, like, if you think about it, the concept is pretty similar. There's a day of judgment as well, and then obviously you should do good and forbid evil.
Yeah.
So why do you think you didn't really respect it? You did, like, let's say I did a sin and I wasn't feeling sorry for it, or I definitely when I was a Christian, I was baptized and I did all this. I think at 16 I became atheist completely, but I used to like believe. I used to pray to God, not to Jesus. I remember that as a kid, because it was really strange to me as well. Like, what am I doing here? And then why do you think people, like, even if they claim they're Christian, they just don't follow any of the teachings of Christianity, not even the basic ones, and they don't even believe in it? If you ask them, they just say, yeah, I'm a Christian. And but that, what does it mean? So why do you think Christianity went so off that nowadays, if you identify as Christian, it's just like, well, it's in the name only. There's very few practicing Christians actually, or the
Yeah.
ones who actually follow everything as it's supposed to be followed. And Muslims are the other way. Like, Muslims are usually like pretty strict, pretty
Yeah,
on
it's a
point.
really, really good question, because I guess it's one I'm still trying to figure out. Like, what is it about Christianity that just makes it so aloof? So, and I guess one of the reasons is that they sort of make it like a catalog religion, like you pick and choose. So
Yeah.
you're coming across, like if you read the Bible, you're coming across all these things, and there's loads of laws, and it's like, don't really like that one. And like
Yeah.
even the priests are like, no, don't worry about that one.
Yeah.
And it's
You can
like,
even be, I think gay marriage now is fine with the
yeah,
Pope. So
yeah. So there was it. It never felt like that anyone really had a relationship with the scripture. It became more of like this cultural thing. Um, even when you speak to people, this idea of Jesus as God, that like when you question them, like half of them end up putting forward some like heretical view, or
mhm.
even probably more than half of them. They don't. No one really understands anything about the doctrine,
I
or
think
how to.
one thing that's really like strange is like Jesus died for your sins. So like God came as a man, and it was really appealing to me. Like, and then I was like, why would a God want to die? Like, why would he want to experience death? Is there a reason for that? Like, he already pretty much, he's all powerful, all knowing, all everything. Like, why would he has a need to come to earth and die for the
Yeah,
sins of humans?
it seemed like a theatrical to me. Like it
But
always
it's
felt a
pretty,
bit.
from your perspective as a Christian, it's like great because he died for my sins. I can do whatever I want. I'm pretty much saved.
Yeah, I guess there maybe some people think like that, but for me, it was always like, why would he need to do that? Like, can he
Mhm.
not just be like, oh, you believe in me, like here's forgiveness? Like, why have to go through all of these unnecessary jumps and hoops? Like, why? I could never get my head around it, and so that element of it was always strange to me, and I never really, I guess, even thought in terms of that as a necessary component for my salvation. I was still quite young. I was just more trying to get my head around this whole, like, the relationship between it. And then you obviously, as you're reading the Bible and they're telling you about when Jesus alayhi salam was like going through the desert for 40 days and 40 nights, and the devil's having chats with him, and they're having a little back and forth. And the devil's like, why don't you ask God to turn that rock into a loaf of bread? Why don't you jump off this mountain and see if God will save you? And like, and the whole conversation didn't strike me as the devil thinking he was speaking to God. Like, it didn't make any sense. And then he's like, well, if you obey me, I'll give you everything you can see from the top of this mountain. I'll give you all of it. So hold on a sec. Like at the beginning of the Bible, the devil like fully knows who God is. Like he's not like someone that's been created at a distance like we have.
Yeah.
And sort of trying to discover whether or not that he believes in God. Like, no, he was there. He was like among the council of the angels. He knows who God is. Like, it's not a mystery for him. There's no leap of faith required for this guy. So why on earth is he offering Jesus everything? Like, what's he got to offer the one who owns all? Like, what's going on here? And what the way Jesus is sort of having a response with him, this back and forth, just does not scream, oh, by the way, I think I'm God. Even when he was on the cross in the Bible, whoever was there on the cross screams up to the sky, oh, Father, why have you forsaken me?
Mhm.
And that was always something that really struck me as strange. And then when I started reading about the Islamic like kind of approach to this story,
I was trying to sort of figure out, well, if Islam is true, how do you reconcile this idea that Jesus alayhi salam wasn't crucified? And that moment on the cross kept screaming out to me, well, there is a possibility here that it wasn't even Jesus. And so whoever's saying, oh, Father, why have you forsaken me? Could that have been someone else that maybe ended up taking Jesus's place somehow? Or that, you know, possibly he even thought he was taking a hit for Jesus, or he, you know, he maybe sacrificed himself to prevent Jesus from being crucified or something. I don't know. There was all these like ideas running through my head. And all of these made much more sense to me than the narrative. Like all of these simply as possibilities. I'm not saying that is exactly how it happened. Allahu alam, you know, what actually occurred. But it all, even these as possibilities, seemed much more plausible to me than any of these conceptions of a Trinity or of Jesus alayhi salam being God incarnate. That was always hugely absurd. But with regards to like the initial question you asked, why? I think it's probably because you just see it when you're reading the Bible, like Jesus alayhi salam saying, you know, I come to confirm the law, you know, and not to change it. You know, he clearly took his religion very seriously. You know, he told the people to follow the Pharisees, you know, to do what they say, not what they do. And the Jews had like a very particular moral law, and Jesus was a practicing Jew. Like he wasn't like your typical Christian today. Like there's worlds apart between what you see going on in terms of what Jesus is asking people to do. You know, praying with his head on the floor. Like where did that go? What did we not just? Should we just get rid of all of it? And it just felt like they were sort of throwing it all away and then leaving the theatrics and keeping this sort of like a play running.
Yeah.
And so it always felt really hollow or empty, or like it even I don't even really never really got the impression there was any sort of, I don't know, it was a while ago now, so maybe I'm projecting a little bit. But I don't know. And you go to the churches and there's no life there. There's no, like, it's all very drill, empty again. Like everyone sort of seems aloof, like, you know, like they're there, but they're not really there. They're just trying to like, oh, Sunday again.
Yeah.
Gotta get through this.
I used to stand out in front of the church and smoke on Sundays.
That's the plan.
Yeah, that was how I was.
The kind of attitude that's quite typical for churches, I guess.
Yeah.
People are there and not there. And then you go to the mosque and it's like, it's lively. Like you've got young people there. Like at uni, there was this huge church next to the uni and it was never open. Open, massive thing. And then it had a sign that says, we're open for 2 hours on a Sunday. And then like you'd see, and it wasn't like people were rushing to get in or piling in, or like, you know, that people were praying on the street because there was no room in the church because everyone's in there. Like there's nothing like that. And the mosque or the prayer room, it wasn't even a mosque. The Muslims had this tiny little, it was like a cupboard behind the church, and it was literally just 2 small rooms, and it was always like, even when it wasn't Friday, it was always getting packed for prayer, especially prayers like Maghrib and things like that. There was always so many there, and it was always young people. It was like young men and young women going into the you know, the sisters' room, because there was obviously separation, and the young men were filling up there. And it wasn't like there was a man like pulling people in off the street and like, oh, you're Muslim, get in here now. Like, no, there was none of that. They were coming in off their own accord, and they were like, they were getting washed, they were doing wudu, like they were taking it seriously. And they were stood there, and then someone would say the adhan, and it would be beautiful, like, you know, they were saying it from the heart, they meant it. And then someone would stand up and lead the prayer, and they said it and they meant it. You could hear they were reciting the Quran because they had a connection to it, because like none of it was hollow. There was, and we would all stand together and we would pray together, and you would feel like brothers, like, you know, like there was these people were strangers to you, like you didn't really know half of them or most of them, but there was a sincere attachment to the religion, so much so that it was even in the youth, and these are kids that have left home for the first time, so the parents aren't about. The parents don't know what they're getting up to. If they wanted to, they could head down to the pub with all the other lads, and they weren't doing that. Like they were going to, and it's not to say there weren't naughty Muslims that did do that. You know, there always was, but it just really struck me that, given the opportunity, knowing that their parents had no way of finding out, that they still took it upon themselves to go to the prayer room, to pray 5 times a day, to have little recitation sessions where everyone would kind of sit down and practice the Quran, or they'd have like just circles where they would talk about something, or they'd get someone of knowledge in, and he'd give like a little talk about something, and there'd be like this conversation going on. Subhanallah, it was, you know, there was so much difference between like the emptiness of the churches, or like even when it did fill up, the people that were filling it it never felt like they ever really wanted to be there. And then you look at Islam, and it's like it's not only like a religion that's, you know, it's got the hearts of the elderly, like when you go to any sort of mosque, but even when you go to the universities, you're finding these prayer rooms, and they're filled with sincere young believers. And subhanAllah, that was always something I found extremely beautiful.
Yeah, that's what I observed in churches. Like it's only full of old people because they realize they're gonna die soon, so they are trying to rush into the churches, like my grandmothers and everybody. But like here, there's so many churches, beautiful, beautiful churches, and they are all empty. So we were thinking, like with the other guys in the mosque, like we should just rent one and just like make it a mosque, because we have to pray in these underground, dark, you know, small things. It's like, when I first visited a mosque, I was expecting something like better, and I just went down the stairs into this dark room, and it was just like weird. And I heard a lot of these stories in these big cities where, you know, these just like random mosques anywhere. And I was used to like church, giant halls, you know, Jesus in the middle, and there's nothing on the walls, nothing. And it's just like, what are we doing here? You just turn yourself and pray. It's just like, okay. And then it kind of, as you said, like a lot of young people, a lot of old people, everybody's there, you know, and in the churches is not many people. So yeah, I completely agree with you on that. And funny enough, with the Islam, actually, like to me, Islam was so foreign. And then when I realized it's actually quite similar, not similar, but it's actually like, it's like an upgrade of Christianity, right? But it's the last thing that I would look into. I would look into Buddhism first before Islam, or I would look into Hinduism or anything else, but not Islam, New Age stuff, you know, crazy spirituality stuff. But Islam is just like, that's so foreign. But actually, it's not.
It's really, really, really controversial as well. As one of the things. It's
but
like,
it's actually, why is it the last choice to consider when I thought like Allah is somebody different? You know, everything is like misconstrued. So yeah.
I think it was a good question. I think it's probably tied to just the public perception. So it, you know, it's one of the most commonly frequented. That's not even a word. Frequenting religions on the media, and it's always because of something bad. Something's happened. Someone's killed someone. Someone's done this. Someone's done that, and that offers a sort of resistance to it, and it makes you think, that's probably, out of all of the ones it could be, what are the chances it's that one? You know, there's that old controversy. Let's not go there. And so you'll, I guess, look elsewhere. But then I guess at some point you start asking yourself, like, well, these aren't really clicking. Yeah, they're not really saying anything that speaks to me in any genuine way. And I guess you start to ask, well, Islam is still there. I can, you know, have a look into it a bit more. And then I guess at some point you start to ask, why is there so much effort to bastardize it? Like, why is there so much effort to keep people away from it? Like, and that raises some peculiar questions as well. Like, what about, and the people that are doing this, are they really trustworthy themselves? Like, you know, the media types, all of these you know, groups and organizations that are really, really trying their hardest to make people not become Muslim. You know, say, let's have a look at them. Are they really people that, you know, I should be following the example of? And you look into it and you're like, no, these guys are pretty dodgy themselves. Like, so what's in it for them? Like, why are they trying so hard to keep you away from this? Like, what? I don't know. And so
Yeah.
you look into it a bit, and it's like, there seems to be
it's
much more
always
to
like
it.
when majority of people like are doing something, it's always wrong. So that's been the rule for my entire life. Like if you see like everybody doing something, there's something wrong with this. Like why is everybody doing, I don't know, going out and getting drunk? Like I think there's been something corrupted happening. And then so I always kind of look into the opposite thing always to do than what everybody else is doing. And Islam is just like, I don't know anybody here who's doing this. Like, why is this the case? and when you dive deeper, you realize like, I didn't actually know anything about it. Like, I always assumed I know, but I don't even know what Islam means. I don't know who's a Muslim, actually the one who submitted. I don't know nothing about the law. I didn't know Jesus was a prophet. Like, I know nothing about it actually. So, and I'm judging it, you know, it's crazy.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
go ahead.
I was just gonna say, yeah, it's a peculiar relationship at the beginning, especially when it's mostly based off ignorance, and you start looking into it, and there's all these like, oh, I didn't know that. Oh, look at that. What Jesus is a prophet? I thought Jesus was the Christians.
Mhm.
Like, how dare they take Jesus from the Christians? And then it's like, oh, right, no. And then you start to sort of see it not as this, like you said, like this foreign religion, as something different, but as the continuation of a line. And
Yeah.
that line runs through history, and it runs through even prior to the birth of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You know, it runs through the history
Yeah.
of, you know, all the Abrahamic tradition, and you see it like leading back all the way to Adam alayhi salam, and it's just the continuation of this message, and then the more you look into it, you see like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala communicating with the people, and them either, you know, haphazardly changing it or not taking it seriously, and you know, giving it different names and things like that. It's like, you know, Judaism is being named after, you know, a particular group of people. Christianity, you know, the followers of Christ, and then Islam is not like, it's not Mohammedism. It's not, you know, it's not this ism of people that follow this particular thing. It's Islam is submission to God, and because of the general definition of that name as well, it applies to that whole line. Whereas the term Christianity doesn't apply to the Jews because they're not followers of Christ, and you know, Judaism doesn't apply to the Christians anymore because they've become separated from that, and you know, you've got the followers of how do you want to refer to it, Judah or whatever it was. And so these names are very particular to groups, but Islam is general enough. So even when you're saying, you know, Abraham was a Muslim, well, you know, according to the definition of what a Muslim is, you know, the follower of Islam, the one who submits to the will of God, this applies. It's encompassing,
Yeah.
even to that history.
Yeah, I agree with that, definitely. And you studied philosophy, right? As
Yeah,
well.
yeah.
So what would you say to people, maybe, I don't know. I had a philosophy class in the uni and a couple of things, but I don't have like a full-on degree in it. But what would you say is like the most important maybe lesson that you learned about philosophy? Because nowadays, especially when people are considering, because let's say there's a lot of atheists living nowadays, young people, and they start looking into philosophy as something that has answers, but they realize that you'll have more questions after looking into philosophy than before, and then they'll go into this new age stuff maybe. So what do you think about philosophy as like a subject? Does it provide any answers for people if they're looking for them, as like coming from atheism, I assume, because I don't think Christians will look into philosophy, or maybe they do, but it's more for people who want to probably understand the world.
Yeah.
and they don't have any sort of worldview at that stage or something like that?
Good question. So philosophy, I think you're right. People do think that, I'm going to look into philosophy and I'm going to become this wise man,
Yeah.
and I'm going to get all these answers, and this pile of knowledge that I have is going to increase. And then, but they go in with this sort of naive approach, and it's not to say that it doesn't have its uses or that it doesn't have the ability to make people wise to a certain degree. Some of the wisest people some of the best conversations, the most sincere conversations I've had are I've been with philosophers, even people who completely disagree with me. Like we've had amazing conversations trying to get to the bottom of things. But for the most part, I would say philosophy is something that provides you with a lot of I call it negative knowledge, but I don't mean negative as in bad. I mean negative in the sense that it's there's a distinction between knowing what you know and knowing what you don't know. But both of these are a form of knowing. That is, they're both a form of knowledge. And when people get into it, they expect the things you know to increase, but then they forget that there's this pile of things you don't know. That is your recognition of your ignorance. How much I don't know increases exponentially quicker than the pile of what I know I do know. And because there's a distinction, people don't see the latter as a form of knowledge. They see it as something that sort of is bad. Like, oh, I'm so stupid. Look at all the things I don't know. But they just say I don't know, and they don't say I know I don't know that. And so they don't recognize it as a knowledge, as a form of knowledge. And then the more they learn in philosophy, the bigger this pile of things they don't know increases, and it's just growing and growing, and it grows much quicker than the pile of things that they know. And even then, it's stealing things from things they thought they knew. So they had things in this pile of the things I know, and then as you kind of go through philosophy, it's like, I didn't really know that. And then you got to like take these things out and put them on the pile of things I don't know. And philosophy is very much like that. It's just you spend a lot of time taking things off your pile of things I thought I knew, and putting them on the pile of things I know I don't know. And then people get sort of really run down by that, and they're like, I came here to learn stuff, and it feels like all I'm doing is unlearning a lot of stuff. But that is progress, in the sense that, like, if you knew wrong things, it's good to let go of them. Like, and it's good to realize that I didn't know that, actually. I didn't know that. And I was under the impression, like, philosophy is this path to truth. I'm going to go there, and it's like, there's going to be all of this amazing conversation, all these people like discovering truth together. And then you get there. It's not like that at all, really. It's like, it's literally just disagreement on things that even the most average person would agree on. And it's like the higher up, or the longer you spend studying philosophy, the more you're going to disagree about, and like the more split everyone becomes. So it's not like this path to truth where everyone's discovering something and then they unite and move forward. It's like, what about this thing that absolutely everyone is completely okay with and no one questions? Well, let's have like 50 different ways of approaching that quite simple subject. And all of these different philosophers all vary in any way that you can vary. Like, there's people will, and it's I don't know, sort of indicative of that, the character that you sort of refer to yourself as slightly as this rebel. Like, I sort of want to go against the grain. It's almost like people who end up studying philosophy are innately that kind of people, like the salmon that swims upstream rather than going with the flow of the river. They fight it, and they're like trying to jump up waterfalls and that. Philosophy is very much like that.
Yeah, I mean, you can question everything. I think you can even question whether you exist, and there's a ton of opinions about whether even this world is real, So
there's a whole subject in philosophy on that. And then in my second year in metaphysics, we went through, I think it was I think the whole of metaphysics was just literally trying to figure out whether or not the external world existed.
Yeah.
and going through all of these different, like trying to justify it. How do we know? It's like, it's a good question. How, like, do we have an argument that we can put forward that explicitly proves the existence of the external world? And then you're just reading about this like historical attempts in, you know, through the age of enlightenment, from you've got Descartes through to like John Locke developing off the ideas of Descartes, and then you've got Berkeley, and you know, all of these people having this back and forth trying to figure out whether the external world exists. And it's like, subhanAllah, it just, and it was really difficult for them to do so. I don't like the best answers ended up being something like, there was one guy who was like, what does he mean he doesn't know if the world exists? And the guy kicks a rock and he goes, I refute him thus. And he just like kicks this stone. He's like, that was sufficient for him as a refutation. And I think that probably is something that the average person would find as like probably the most wise answer to that whole back and forth. It's like,
Yeah.
Like it was and it was interesting because it's like, right, rationality, because it was the consequence of the enlightenment ideals. Like you have reason, rationality, all of, you know, truth, all of this, and then it's like it was very childish in a way. It was very naive. Like, the human being is going to be able to reveal all. Let's go and do that. And so they kind of go off, and there's like, someone points out, hey, we don't actually have any arguments to prove rationally that the external world exists. It's like, oh, that's easy, let's do that. And so then they start trying to do it, and like all it ends up being is someone puts an argument forward, and then someone comes along and says, your argument's a bit crap, mate, like you've not really done what you set out to do. And it's like, well, why? And it's like, well, there's a flaw, here's a flaw, there's a flaw, there's a flaw. And then like, you're right, okay. And then someone else comes along and goes, well, what about this? And then it's like, it's completely different. Like, this person's going the route of you know, because the physical, everything's physical, blah, blah, blah. And then someone else is like, no, everything's in the mind, it's all an illusion, you know, blah, ooh, idealism, and you know, everything's a product of the mind. And you got Berkeley's like, you know, it's all in the mind of God. And then he's put his idea forward, and then someone comes along and is like, oh, well, your argument doesn't, you've not really proved it. And it's just this back and forward of people like, I've proved it, no you haven't, I've proved it, no you haven't, I've proved it, no you haven't. And it really just highlights the uselessness of man when they try to do things independently. Like, man trying to get to the bottom of everything.
I guess
almost sorry, choking on my tea there. Yes, it's funny, it's interesting.
Yeah, I guess people then say like, oh, you're just you know, chose a religion because it's the easier path. You don't have to think about a lot of things, you know, it's already there. You have the objective morality, you have everything kind of set up, so you have a very kind of worldview set in stone. And you know, philosophy is really about thinking about stuff. And it's just like, yeah, but like there's it for me actually what made me consider Islam was philosophy, was these arguments and Kalam cosmological arguments, whether about the external world or internal world, the Big Bang and all these things, because I was an atheist. So I wasn't convinced through like that Jesus was this prophet or something. This didn't matter to me, but it was more about the philosophy and the way Islam approaches like thinking and logical reasoning was really intriguing, because this doesn't happen in Christianity. So what do you think about that link between?
So I see it as the silliest contention ever, because it just does not map onto like the reality of how I experience things. Being a quote unquote free thinker was so much easier. Like, you could just take things on and throw them away willy-nilly, like, and if anything, it was like there was no effort. I could do what I wanted when I wanted. Like, there wasn't anything really binding me. And if things became inconvenient for even societal reasons, it was easy enough for me to just fall in line. Like, there was nothing there. Now, when it comes to Islam, that was difficult. man. It wasn't easy. And like, even when it comes to certain things, it's like, if anything, it motivates my thinking a lot more. Because like when I'm looking into things, so you come across something and it's like, right, so this is the position from Islam. How, you know, if you were to get into an apologetics conversation, like how do you go about arguing for this position exactly? Like, and even coming from like a Western background, some of these things are quite counterintuitive. Like, this is a bit odd. How do you, especially coming from that background of not being a believer and moving into it, you still have that baggage, I guess, and you know, you're still embedded in the world that you came from. Like, I've not left the UK. I'm still here. You know, for the most part, most of the people in my life are non-Muslim, and so, you know, I know what their reactions are going to be because they're the same reactions that I had when I approached Islam. And so it's like, well, this is mad. And then you've got to go through the thinking process of like, well, you know, how is it that this could be possible? And so you've got to deal with that. Because if, you know, if Allah is real, and if Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is a prophet, and if the Quran is the word of God, if these are true, then if, you know, this, and if this is a truth, then there must be a way of like explaining that. And so even when it's sort of counterintuitive, or counterintuitive in the sense that, you know, it doesn't map onto, say, the things that you've been taught when you've been growing up, you've really got to grapple with these ideas and try to think about it. And it's not just grappling with them for the sake of just absorbing them. You know, there is nothing holding me to Islam. If anything, it'd be much easier for me to apostate. Like, my life would become a million times easier in terms of like, I wouldn't need to pray 5 times a day. I don't need to get up early in the morning. I don't need to fast the month of Ramadan. You know, I don't need to like make the effort to go to a mosque on Fridays and things like that. Like, there's all these things that I could just let go of, and I could just do whatever I wanted. I wouldn't feel guilty about just playing computer games for hours and hours and hours and hours, like, or wasting my time. Like, I could do what I wanted. That is the easier option. Just going for religion isn't easy. It's not, you know, like, I've got to deal with people's perceptions, the awkward conversations. I don't necessarily always look like I had to shave my beard off because I made a mistake trimming it. I was trying to neaten it up, and then I ended up taking the whole thing off. But like, people don't necessarily see, oh, he's a Muslim. You know, like, it doesn't pop out to them. And so there's been times where I've been sat with people and we're talking, and then the conversation of Islam pops up, and then they're like, oh, you know, these Muslims, pesky guys, are so I'm Muslim, and it's like, oh, awkward.
Yeah, that happened to me as well.
Yeah,
I don't look Muslim at all. So
yeah, and
true.
so we're ninja Muslims. We've you know, we're sneaking about, and we hear the things that people talk about when they think that no Muslims around. And it's, you know, the contention that, oh, you've just gone for Islam, or you've just gone for religion because it's the easy way out. That's the biggest load of crock, man. It's not the easy way out. There's so much effort involved. There's so much, like, and it's not like it closes your thinking at all. It's common contention. It really opens it up, because like, I'm an open person. I'm quite willing to hear the arguments of the like, I went and I studied philosophy, and I was engaged. I was probably one of the most engaged in the classes. I was there. I was always like the first one to speak. Whenever anyone put forward a position, I'd engage them in it, and like, I'd give a rebuttal or a response and wait to hear theirs, and I'd hear them out, and we'd, you know, I was never accused of being a dogmatist. Like, I was like, yeah, maybe you've got a good point, even if at the end of it I still don't believe what they've said. You know, I'm still capable of admitting when an argument has failed, because I recognize a failed argument isn't a proof to the non-existence of the thing you failed to argue for. So if I give a really bad argument about the fact that you're from Czechoslovakia, that doesn't mean you're not from Czechoslovakia just because my argument was rubbish.
Doesn't exist, so
yeah. Oh yeah, that as well. But
yeah.
so, but the point being, like, just even if you give a bad argument for something, it doesn't mean that thing doesn't exist. And although my example there wasn't the best example, but
many people still think it does, so no worries.
Okay. It's Eastern Europe. there's a lot going on there. So like even
Even
you've got-
mentioning this is Eastern Europe would get you in trouble here. We're Central Europe. You can't say Eastern. Like maybe in Poland, yes, but Czechs, they don't say that we're Eastern Europe. But it's again just a small local thing going on. So
yeah, well,
Whereas-
we don't. I guess being on the most western side of
Western.
Europe, we just sort of split it down the middle. We don't see central. We just see you've got the east and west.
it is technically Eastern because we were under communism, but
Yeah.
geographically we're more west. But anyways, this is a long, long problem.
But yeah, just relating to obviously what we were talking about there, that the whole point is that you can give bad arguments for something, and then sometimes people they think, oh well, if this argument fails, then the whole thing that was being argued for has been destroyed, it's been debunked, and it really doesn't work like that. And when you're studying philosophy as well, you start to realize this. It's like half of the time you're not dealing with actually knowing whether or not the thing has existed. You're dealing with positive arguments, and whether or not that positive argument did well enough to prove what it argued for. And then you've got all these kind of responses that come back, and they can go on forever. There's like layers after layers after layers.
Mhm.
It's like an ocean with waves crashing in constantly, and there's no ceasing to it. It's almost a never-ending labyrinth that you can just walk down forever. And in that way, the philosophy is very nihilistic, because it feels like you walk down that path, and it's very difficult to sort of get to certain conclusions. And it's not to say that it's impossible, because there are certain things you can come to know, and there are obviously there's a lot of arguments, like you mentioned, the Kalam, the cosmological arguments, the arguments from contingency, all these things I find extremely convincing, and I lean towards them being good arguments, and I lean I've heard the rebuttals to them, and I find a lot of them, obviously there's some really good rebuttals, and there's certain forms of the argument that I rather not lean on, because it's just the conversation ends up going down this infinite route. Funnily enough, like the infinite regress one, you can almost have like an infinite regress of conversations on that one particular thing. But I prefer arguments like from dependencies, talking about the set of dependent things like that.
Just arguing what is actually true. Is science the all knowing? And then what is science? What's the philosophy of science? How do you know something is true? Is there something like intuition that cannot be proven or put into microscope? Like, how do you know? There's so many layers you can go down. And people just stop at science usually, but there's a much deeper hole you can get into what actually is the truth.
Well, and this touches on the leap of faith. Like, everyone is making leaps of faith, and science is this sort of uncontroversial thing that's easy to stop on, because it doesn't come along with a load of to-do list. There's no like rules, in the sense that, like, if I say I believe in science, that doesn't mean I have to pray 5 times a day. That doesn't mean that I have to fast. It doesn't mean I have to feel guilty about the things that I do in secret. It doesn't, none of this is associated with that. And so just saying I believe in science.
But what is science?
Really
the first thing they teach you is science changes all the time, and it's not truth. Like, it changes with time. Every law of science will change. So you believe in science now, in a specific sort of science, let's say Big Bang Theory, but in 10 years, maybe they'll confirm it's actually wrong. There's multiverses only. So no Big Bang. And then you're like, okay, what do I do now? So you're just constantly changing your position. So it's not like something set in stone forever in any science. Even evolution and all these things are
shifting paradigms,
theories, but they can change. For me, the biggest thing was because first I read the Quran, then I had like a moment of awakening of fitra, let's say. It was during jogging, which was really strange, but I had this moment where everything came to like conclusion, like, yes, there must be a creator. And then I started to read it, and I came to this chapters, the surahs about divorce laws and the law of retribution and like all these things, and it was so complex, and I was like, there's no way this is true. Like, why would God talk about these sort of details? Like, okay, I know Quran is not true because of this. And so I kind of forgot about Islam and went about my couple of months, and I was still praying to God, but I wasn't like considering Islam, because I was like, no, there's no way this is gonna be this much detailed. And then I, came back to it, and just the whole Sharia and the whole laws are so detailed. I was like, why is this like in Christianity or other religions? In Islam, everything is detailed: economy, politics, the way you treat your wife, the way you divorce a woman, the way who gives who how much money, the inheritance law, how do you go on the court, the so many things. I was like, this is super detailed. And then I was like, it makes sense that it would actually be this much details. Like, why would God leave out, the most basic societal issues to just a chance? It's not just because the Bible is more about like Jesus and like all, more spiritual, but this is like very on point. Like, there's no spirituality in it. Like, you get a wife, she needs to wait 4 months after she's divorced, and like very laid out the rules. I was like, wow, this is like a civic code, right? In a way.
And not only that, you look at what this book produced, and in the time that it produced it, it's like, subhanAllah. So this man, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in the middle of this desert, out in the middle of nowhere, he grew up as this sort of shepherd. Like, he was just herding livestock, and he managed to come up with a book filled with all of these jurisdictional coding, this law, filled with all of this information, so much so that like people have been, you could probably fill libraries just with commentaries on the things that have been said on all of this. And all the book itself and his example gave rise to a hyper civilization that managed to spread all the way from Andalusia into China, in the blink of an eye. And it's like, what are the chances of this man just sort of writing things on his basic whims and coming up with a book that was capable of not only allowing that civilization to begin, but then for it to sustain itself for such a long period of time, and to be a dominant force in the world for such a long time. And then, obviously, one of the contentious people bring that and say, oh, well, look, if it's true, why is the Muslim world in the state that it's in today? And it's like, well, that's not necessarily indicative of the fact that it's the consequence of this book, but it might be more of the consequence of they no longer follow the book as much as they used to, or they no longer adhere in that part of the world as much as they should have done. So you go to places like Egypt, there's still obviously a large religious community, but there's clear evidence that they're sort of leaving it behind to some degree, and they're much more directed towards the Western way of life, and they're no longer following the Quran and the Sunnah. They're following, the Western model, and there's a lot of this turning away from religion, and you can see how that might have been one of the huge factors. And then obviously there's a lot of other political issues, the US and the European places and their involvement and meddling in the power structures over there, getting involved and causing things to occur. So that's another factor to it. But there's many things, and it's recent. Like Islam has been around, and it still has a grip on many people's hearts, even if it's not the whole community. It's significantly more than what you see when you look at other religious communities. So yeah, it's mad when you're looking at it like that. And these rules, there is, when you look into them more as well, wisdom to them. It's not just arbitrary. There's benefit that comes from it.
Yeah, I was just thinking about the law of retribution. Like, the closest relative of the murdered victim can decide whether to give this person a free pass or whether to kind of claim eye for an eye. And you just read it and then you think about it like, is this more fair, more just than what's happening in the courts nowadays? Are there let's say mistrials or trials going bad, all these things happening? Wouldn't this be a more fair way to do this? And yeah, there's a giant wisdom behind this, but you really have to think about each of these things. And what do you think now maybe Muslims need today the most? Like the whole Ummah, what do you think is like the thing that we need? I would consider myself part of it now, but how can maybe reverts help the Ummah? Because I think it's, you know, I wouldn't say there's a complex from being a Muslim, but there's definitely a shyness about it, especially over here in the UK. Maybe not in a Muslim country, but you know, could Muslims be proud about being a Muslim? What do you think is missing from the Ummah in general?
Yeah, so I think reverts play a key part in this, because one of the biggest problems is this sort of inferiority complex that born Muslims suffer from. They sort of, in many cases, especially in the West, obviously they make up a minority of the population, and they have to deal with this general idea that's sort of settling in the minds of many Westerners. The religion's a silly thing. It's child's play. You know, it's the way of the old times, and we know better now. And blah 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 blah. So they've got to kind of deal with a huge force at play here, and obviously the West is materially successful. You know, there's a lot of good things going on here. We've got like the NHS. You know, we're not. If there's war, we do it elsewhere. We don't do it here.
Yeah.
You know, and so there's a lot of security and safety in these places, and that gives a particular impression across. And so when Muslims are sort of living here, they constantly have to fight with that, especially, you know, second generation Muslims. So they've had, you know, they're maybe the parents or the grandparents are like immigrants that came over, and they've been born and raised there. They end up having to have these like sort of double lives, where one part of the youth, one part of a particular youth is sort of living as a secular person with his secular friends, and he's being like all the other kids. And then when he goes home, he's got to put his Muslim mask on, and so there ends up being this sort of schizophrenia almost, or, you know, this dual personality that causes a conflict in the born Muslim as they grow older, and it's just because the dunya is calling to them, and they see people sort of enjoying the dunya. They see, oh, you know, they get to go out and they get to have girlfriends and they get to have this, and obviously when you're young and naive and impatient, you might see people like enjoying themselves, and you're going to see it. Like, there are times where someone has a girlfriend and, you know, they're smitten and everything's like the best thing ever, and it's like, oh, I'm so in love, and like, and they're just all over each other, and you're, as a Muslim, hanging about with these people, seeing this, and you're like, I want that. Or maybe there's a girl you see and she's interested in you, and so on and so forth. And so there's all these things happening, and as a young naive person, it's hard to see what's wrong with it, because it looks so good. Look at how nice it is. Look at all the fun and joy being had. And then you look at like the strict Muslim parent, and they're like, don't you do that? And it's like, but look at how miserable he wants me to be. Like, why can't I just have fun and just enjoy myself? And so there's this happening, and it's very under, it's very under the carpet as well, because obviously a lot of the youth are trying to hide it. Now the thing is with reverts is they come from that, then they're moving in the opposite direction. So and not just that, they're often fleeing from it, and they're like, don't go that way, it's horrible, it's nightmares. It's that flower that looks beautiful, but you smell it and it's poisonous. Or, you know, the fruit that looks appetizing and you eat it and it kills you. Like, stay away from it. It's not what it seems like. It you know, it lures you in. You know, Pleasure Island, it's going to be the best thing ever, and you get there and it's like, you know, it's a trap. Like, to turn around and flee from it. And the role of the revert, it's very much like that. Like, we come from that world, we see it as it is, very much so from like its inner mechanism, and we see how poisonous it can be, and we are trying to leave that behind and get away from it. And when people born into you know, Islamic background see us, there's this, there can be wisdom in them, learning from other people's mistakes and not having to make them themselves. And so, like, even just conversations like this, like we're having, that offers a huge iman boost for the Muslim community. And and especially when you have people who are Muslim and they're unashamedly Muslim, and they're a revert. Like I am a Muslim. Like if people have a problem with that, let them. If they want to complain, let them complain. Like I'm not. I'm at a point where I'm not really that bothered. Like I'm quite comfortable in my shoes. I am a Muslim, and sincerely so. Like I genuinely believe in Islam. I genuinely believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I genuinely believe Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is a prophet. I believe his companions, the Sahaba, truly believed in that as well, and that they followed him and his example. And I'm fine with that. Like and when they see Westerners being fine with that, despite all the effort to kind of push people away from it, that in itself is, I guess, motivation to maybe take it a bit seriously and then to begin the journey of learning about it in a bit more depth. Because prior to that, it's just something inherited, followed by blind belief. But when they see people running in the opposite direction as if away from a fire, I think at least, like if you're going to somewhere and like everyone's telling you, oh, come on, we're going into this building, and people are running out of the building saying, don't go in there, there's a poisonous gas or there's something, like, you might still want to go in if people are still going in there and going, oh, ignore them, they're just conspiracy theorists, or or whatever. Maybe you'd go in, but maybe you'll go, hold on a sec, like what if what they've said is true? And so you can maybe peek through the windows, and like the listening to the stories of the reverts is that peeking through the windows. It's like maybe checking the CCTV, is what he said true? Yeah. And like you can confirm it. It's like, okay, this does seem to be a common problem that Westerners are dealing with. Oh yeah, they do seem to have extremely high rates of suicide and depression. Oh yeah, they have all of these problems. People are not as happy as they seem to be, because we're putting a facade on half of the time. And
I agree.
So that, I would say, is one thing that Muslims need to do. Is they just need to return to developing a relationship with the Quran, reading it, because it is the word of God. It is the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And in developing that relationship with it, you'll find yourself sort of letting go of the dunya and the things that are going to cause you pain in this world, and turning to things which will heal you, like, and fix a lot of the things that are going wrong. Like when a lot of the issues that you have to deal with, becoming a Muslim removes that, if they're doing it genuinely. So you're not drinking, you're not messing around with the opposite gender, you're not sleeping about, you're not gambling, you're not, all of these things were like pretty much central to my sort of way of life when I was a teenager or when I was growing up. That's pretty much what we did. And
I don't know if I would be, I mean, it must be really difficult for these born Muslims, because especially with the culture that Britain or Czech Republic has, it's very similar. There's a lot of drinking. For example, we have a big porn industry here. You have it's crazy. And a lot of Brits come here and they have stag parties, and a lot of people have depression, mental health. Actually, 1 in 3, I think, right now, it's diagnosed with some issue. And it's just, I went through all of this, and it's pretty difficult. And you get to the point of nihilism, and I was even, considering like very severe depressions and stuff like that I had. So it's very difficult. It looks really nice. It takes, but within a couple of years, you get into this point of like almost no return.
Yeah,
and
the things
it's pretty
that
crazy.
give you joy cease to give joy anymore.
Yeah, definitely. Whether that's just watching porn, it's very addictive and very destructive to anything that you do. Just being like display those pictures or the videos are just destroying your iman just by looking at it, and you don't realize it, but it's the way it is. And now that I've been, alhamdulillah, I've been on the deen for a while, it's like night and day. I'm a completely different person, no mental health issues. You have 5 times a prayer, 5 days you pray, not 5 days, 5 times a day you pray. So that's your kind of like, I would say mental or almost balancing. Like a mental balancing.
So, like the compass when you've got to configure it.
Yeah,
gotta do all
exactly.
of that.
Like, I'm lost. Where's my GPS here? What's my destination? Jannah. Okay, here we go again. So anytime I feel off, you just balance the compass and you go. But I don't know if I would be able to do this as a young person, let's say 17, 18, because I was just lost in dunya, and just had these crazy things. You know, these girls, for example, you know, just taking morning after pills. Like, how crazy is that? You could start a family by accident. Like, what? You know, just thinking about the consequences of those actions is horrible, but you just take it lightly.
There's a few people I know that have got like kids with
yeah, I know a few people as well,
several different women, and it's
and
like,
you don't,
and
those
and
kids
they're
will
not,
grow
they
up.
never even they never even had a relationship with these women,
Yeah,
in the
never.
sense, like, it's just we went out one night and they stumbled upon this particular person and something happened, and the next day it was like, oh, this is awkward, and then a few
Yeah.
months later, oh, by the way, I'm pregnant, you're a father.
And those kids will grow up. Like, I come from a divorced family, and it's been so difficult. Like, my father left when I was 2, and I've seen him at 20 later. Like, 18 years went by, and he left me completely with my mother, and in debt and everything. And it's just, my whole childhood was so difficult because of that. Just one mistake, you know, just one person, you know, fooling around with somebody, and it created life, like my life that's now, you know, doing these YouTube videos. But like, it's strange that even that small mistake can create like a giant ripple effect. You don't even realize it.
Yeah, and it also really highlights the seriousness of this, and how this sort of nonchalant approach to sexuality and to like dealing with people, you know, with lack of commitment, how it's not a joke. Like, yeah, there are, you can have abortions and you've got the morning after pill, but these are not like very successful ways of dealing with the problem. Abortions, half of the time, like, I think, fully recognize that there is something deeply wrong with the concept of abortion, and intuitively so. I think many people, like my mum, she's like, she didn't have to read about all the philosophy. She didn't have to go through all the arguments. She just it's in her very being that it's something abhorrent. That, like, if you're going to be stupid and get yourself into the position where you're going to be pregnant, then you commit to that. Like, you're done. Like, that's it. If you don't want to do that, then don't mess about. Practice some bloody celibacy. Like, it's and people talk like that's not an option. Like, simply not being promiscuous. Simply
because you
not
can't
just
maximize your pleasure, which is the societal norm, to maximize pleasure, right? So
yeah, but it's just it's not a joke, and the reason is because there are consequences to it. And you just mentioned one really big aspect of that there are a lot of people being born today, and I would go as far as arguing that most of the people born in Western society are born as the consequence of this mentality of just hooking up with people, of not really ever getting with people with the intention of starting a long-term family relationship where, you know, you have a father and a mother present going on into the future. It's not that kind of thing anymore, and that has a huge consequence and a huge effect on the children of these relationships. It's not just about mum and dad. These children are living beings, and these things affect the children more than they affect the parents making these decisions on a whim. You know, because at the end of the day, like, the parents are central figures in the life of these children. Like, and especially when you're young, and all of these things, the way they occur, like my relationship with my father, like when he passed away when I was 9, this thing caused so much that messed with my head, like, in a very long and permanent way. Like, it very much affected who I am. I had to deal with a lot of anguish trying to figure out my relationship with him, even after he'd passed. Even like having it affected me in a way where, like, there was a very long period of time where I hated my dad, and this hate was like something that really sort of I carried with me, and affected life in general. It affected the way I looked at the world, and it was so difficult letting go of that. And he'd been dead for 20 years, like however long it was. Like,
Yeah.
It's not a game. Like, it's not, and people are really trivializing it. And there's an old myth that I heard about, a Germanic one, and it's from back in the pagan European days. But they came up with this conception of this being. I think they refer to it as a god. Obviously, I wouldn't ever refer to it as that. But there was this creature or this being that would wait at the bottom of a mountain. I'm probably going to bastardize it now. It might have even been called Eckhart, but it was a creature that would wait at the bottom of a mountain, and it would warn the people of the souls of the unborn were going to come and wreak havoc, or they were going to come and seek their revenge. And it was a warner, and it would keep warning them that if they don't mend their ways, that the souls of the unborn would wreak havoc. And when I was reading about this story, I'll have to read it up again because it's been a while since I looked up at that. But I couldn't help but think of, like, you know, this morning after pill culture, this abortion culture, and how that there's a level of wisdom in that story, in the sense that this seems to be what's happening now. And I think that if we carry on as a society, and when I say we, I mean like our people, the Westerner, you know, the European, the majority of who are non-believers, if I guess they carry on this way, that there are going to be severe consequences for it. And it's our job as Westerners and as reverts, as Muslims, is to call them away from that to the best of our ability. And we've got, you know, a hell of a job on our shoulders, because it's a lot of them are, you could say, racist, but there are like certain opinions of the foreigner that are quite common, that I think is one of the biggest obstacles that like the European people have to deal with. And so they see Islam as a foreign person's religion. They don't see it as something that they could accept. Mm-hmm. And so we're going to play a key role in convincing them otherwise. And the reason we're going to play a key role in that is because we are, quote unquote, one of them. And so, you know, that is going to be a sort of burden on us to try to call them to Islam, to call them do Dawah.
Do you have any idea about this effective way of doing Dawah in a non-Muslim country?
You've got to engage with them, haven't you? You've got to make the effort to speak to them still, to put content out. Even just YouTube videos is key to that. People seeing normal people, you know, like we're not coming on here like crazed out of our minds and screaming like weird phrases and that. We're just your standard guys, and it's not like we're doing things. I mean, specifically, I didn't rush into it. You know, I took my time with it. I looked into it. You know, I deal with all these arguments constantly. Really think about them. You know, I'm not lazy with it. And you know, I've come to sincere belief, and that alone, I think, especially if you're talking to people and you're making sense and you're pointing out problems with the way of life that they're sort of living, and if they're being sincere in that moment, they can hear that what you're saying has truth to it. And so I think the key is being sincere. The key is just, you know, if it's something you believe, then make the effort to come to understand it more. Like, study it. You know, get your foundations sorted. What is it I believe, and why do I believe that? You know, how do I go about convincing someone? And half of the time, it's understanding to approach it from a foundational approach. So if you're ever engaging in apologetics, your channel's called Debating Jan, so I'm guessing it's going to be
debating truth.
Debating truth. So it's going to be with Jan.
With Jan,
with Jan. So you're going to be engaging in this kind of thing. Now, what you'll find is a lot of the time people come at you with these secondary issues that are
like, why do women cover and all this stuff?
And it's like, just this doesn't prove or disprove anything. Like, all right, let's say you don't like it. So what? Like, how does that say anything about the truthfulness of that which is being given? The fundamental questions are, does God exist? That's the first question that you need to ask. And if you can't get on board with that first idea, none of the other questions matter. Whether or not someone should cover, whether or not you should get married, how many people you can get married to, all of these questions are absolutely secondary to that. Does God exist? And if the answer to that is yes, the next step is, how does God exist? What kind of God is this God? Is it one God? Is it a trinity? Is it a multiplicity? Is it pantheism? Is it blah, blah, blah? Like, what kind of God is God? But you can't take that step until you've taken the first one. And so you take the first step, and then you take the next one. And then after you've established what kind of God is, you move on to the need for revelation. Would this God communicate with us? Would this God try to give us guidance? Would this God create us with a purpose? Or would it be a sort of, nonchalant deist type of God? Like, what, is there a necessity for revelation? And if there is a necessity for revelation, who was it that revelation was given to? So that'd be the fourth step. And if you can go through these steps, and at the end of it, you end up saying, God is one, he exists, that he did send prophets, and Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam was one of them, then you're a Muslim. You are at Islam, and all of these other issues become secondary to that. And obviously, during that process, there may be touching on elements of these secondary issues, but half of the time, it's just a case of like, you're diverting here. Like, if God exists, and if this is a true religion, then whether or not you can see the wisdom in some sort of secondary, peripheral thing over there is superfluous. Like, what? And this is the majority of the time the path you're trying to keep them on, moving them through those four major steps, and taking it one step at a time. And half of the time, like, obviously, when people are not dealing with it in this approach, they're just fighting in the fog, in the bushes over there and here and there, and they're not, you'll always feel like you're never really making much progress with them, because they could just come with these forever. They go away, and there's another one here, and there's another one here, and like, if you're dealing with apologetics in this way, it's just going to be going around in circles over and over and over again, and you'll never feel like you've made progress. Whereas if you're focusing on these four major steps and taking the steps one at a time, not, like when you're a kid and you're trying to climb the stairs and you go whoop, and you just try to put your foot on the top step, but then you can't get enough leverage to sort of pull yourself up. Like, if you're skipping the steps, you're going to feel like that in the end. And whereas if you take the lowest step first, and then the next step, and then the next step, you'll find yourself climbing stairs. You'll find yourself making progress. And so I think this is key to that. But obviously, making the effort to get your grounding, to learn your aqeedah, your fiqh, studying your religion, and figuring out so that it isn't just a blind faith. Allah says in the Quran, do you not use your reason? Do you not think? This is incumbent upon the believer to not be a blind believer. To not, we have the example of the Prophet Abraham alayhi salam, and the same with the example of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. When he was calling the people of the Quraysh, they were saying, what, you want us to stop following what our forefathers believed? So we are not people who just follow our forefathers. We people are upon truth, and we follow the truth because we believe in it. Not because dad believed it, not because great-granddad believed it, but because we believed it. And this is incumbent upon every Muslim, even if you're born into a Muslim family. Don't just be a Muslim because your dad is. Don't just be a Muslim because your uncle is, and because you're scared of them. Be a Muslim because you've made the effort to look into it and you found it convincing. Be sincere, be authentic, search it, figure it out.
I think I wasn't looking for Islam. I wasn't trying to become religious. It was just always appealing, and all these questions kept coming to me, and I couldn't refute them. I couldn't stop thinking about it. Like, how is this? How am I gonna live with this knowledge that this exists? And I'm still refusing to, acknowledge that the fact that this is truth, and I haven't found anything that contradicts it. But it's a process for everybody, and it's difficult for readers because Arabic language, first of all, is it's something that you feel is foreign.
Using all of these parts of your throat that you've got to use that you've never used before.
Yeah.
Kha.
Yeah. And you know, all these things, like you think like, do you have to change your name? Well, how did you change your name? Maybe my last question would be, when did you change your name to Yusuf?
So, to begin with, I never really wanted to. I didn't like the idea of it. So I kept my name as it was for a while. But my friends, they had family who wanted, like, it was quite common that you'd speak to Muslims and they'd be like, so what's your Muslim name? And I was like, I don't have one. And then they'd always be like, you know, you come across them being kind of let down. And I looked into it and I could see you don't have to change your name. And it's true, you don't have to. Like, as long as your name's a good name, it has good meaning. And my born name, the name that my mother gave me, has good meaning. It's not, you know, a bad name. And not only that, it was the name my mother gave me, and I have a very sincere love for my mother. I don't, you know, I have no intention of ever disrespecting her or hurting her in any way, and so I don't even expect her to not call me by it. So, you know, with my family, they still call me my name, and that's fine. And for a long time, I just wanted everyone else to just call it me. Yeah, and but then if I ever came across someone who was a bit persistent, I would give them the name that that is Yusuf, and I'd let them call me that if they wanted to. And it just got to a point where it's like, oh, yeah, if you're really that bothered, call me that then. But you know, I prefer my born name, and the way I got it is because of that. So this sort of need for the Muslim community to sort of have this name, and so one of my friends, his uncle, may Allah bless him, he was like, so do you have a name? I was like, no, I don't. He's like, can I give you one? I was like, yeah, go on if you want. And he was like, Yusuf. I was like, oh, that's funny. He's like, why? I was like, well, my dad was called Joseph, and that's my middle name. And so, and in Polish, Joseph, the way you say it is Yusuf. And so by giving me that name, you're sort of combining both of my heritages into one. So it's like a Polish way of saying my dad's name, which happens to be my middle name already. So yeah, I'll have Yusuf. And so he gave me that, and then his family would call me that, and then I'd let them because they liked it, and you know, I have love for them, so why not? And but I still preferred my original name, and I don't know what happened, but at some point I was like, I just want to sort of embrace it. And obviously I was reading about the Prophet Yusuf a lot in the Quran, alayhi salam, and I developed a love for that prophet as well, and so I began to love that name a lot. And then I just sort of embraced it at one point. I was like, so, you know, if people ask me when I'm speaking to them, I just tell them my name's Yusuf, and they can call me that. People who know me by my original name, they can keep calling me by that if they want to. I've not told them to stop. And I don't really feel any sort of anxiety about it, but I just sort of live by both names. Those who know me by my other one can call me that. Those who don't, you call me Yusuf, and that'll do.
Did you change your ID, or
No,
you didn't have to?
No.
Yeah, I was thinking of Jan. Well, Jan, it's pronounced Jan, which is also a Polish name. John, basically. And there's Yahweh, the prophet. You know, yeah. Sorry. So I was thinking of that, but it's still too early for me, I guess. Maybe
it's a
in the
beautiful
future.
name, inshallah. But like I said, there's no pressure, so don't. It's funny as well because I had on my channel, I had a discussion with another revert called Steve, brother Steve. May Allah bless him, he's a good lad. And the first thing we were talking about was this: whether or not you know, what name he's going to pick, if he's going to pick one. And I wasn't trying to force him to do that. But then, like, YouTube community was very different than the local community. They all, well, not all of them, a few of them went into an uproar because I was trying to tell him, or they perceived me sort of trying to get him to change his name. But it's not that. Like I say, so long as your name's a good one, Jan is a good name. Like you say there, it's a derivative of John or Yahya. Anyway, so you know, if you want to keep that, keep it. It's cool. But I don't know, you sort of, for me anyway, you develop a sort of love for Arabic, or you develop a love for the names of the prophets, and it's sort of representative of leaving behind something. So like my born name, it's got a lot of baggage with it. You know, there's a person associated with that, and I usually think of it of my younger self. And sort of trying to embrace the new name is also indicative of this transition, or trying to become something better or something new. And a new name along with that is, I guess, a part of that process as well.
No, I agree, definitely. It's good to get advice from another revert, because I oftentimes get advice from born Muslims, and it's sometimes very different, you know, or sometimes they even say like, you shouldn't even live in Prague. This is not possible according to Islam. You should move out and live in Saudi. And I'm like, this is not true. Like, you can live in a non-Muslim country. If they allow you to practice, it's fine. It's just so many things going on, you know.
Well, it's a double-edged sword. So I wouldn't say there's no, like, personally, I think there's probably wisdom in making hijrah. So, like, to you know, travel to a Muslim land.
No, I want to definitely spend a few months in Turkey, but I was just like, I don't have to move out of Prague right now. Like,
well, there's another thing as well. It's like I said, we've got a burden on us in terms of we are probably going to be the most effective way of calling our people, you know, our blood, our family.
That's what I was thinking. Like, you know, there's an opportunity here as well for Dawah, and like, why can't people here embrace this faith if it's presented to them in a certain way? Because I don't think the immigrant guys will be able to convey the message, as I can.
And the reason is because you have that insight into the community, and you know what makes them tick. You know, and you find with born Muslims, they can't really understand why there's a controversy, or why people are uncomfortable with a particular thing. And you can relate to that, because you're like, no, I went through the same thing, and I can see why you feel uncomfortable with that, because we come from this world where that isn't common, that isn't the norm, and so because it's not normal, that there is a human reaction to things you're not used to, or things that are new or strange, and that half of the time is all that it is. And like, all it takes sometimes is just talking them through it, and like helping them to get over it. Like, one of the a really good example of that. So in the UK, everyone just uses, it's a really disgusting example, but it's a good one. So people just use toilet paper. Like,
same here.
Just toilet paper, just a dry piece of paper, and they clean and they keep checking until the toilet paper is no longer dirty, and then they flush the toilet and go off. And that is just like the normal thing for so many people in the UK. And when I went traveling, I had to completely reevaluate whether or not that was the best method of cleaning yourself, because everyone else was using buckets. And this wasn't even just like in the Muslim world. This is like Thailand, Taiwan, Korea. Like, everyone's using water, and you've got buckets with water in them, or you've got like bum guns, like the little and everyone's cleaning themselves properly. And then when you talk to the Westerner, like, about cleaning themselves properly, they seem disgusted by it. And it's like, listen, if you were to get some filth on your hand, how would you clean it? It's like, I'd go wash my hands, you know, and I'd use soap and everything, you know. That's disgusting. I'd make sure it's get off. I was like, okay, so you wouldn't just get a piece of tissue and then just keep like rubbing your hand with a piece of tissue and throwing the tissue away until the tissue looked clean, and then consider your hand clean. Like, just little things like that. It's like, all it takes is just to talk someone through it, and then once they hear it, they're like, oh my God, you're right, that is pretty disgusting. I need to completely reevaluate my
toilet situation.
And that's obviously like a really crude example, but there's many things like that where they hear something in Islam, and they have this reaction to it, and then you explain it to them, or you explain what they think is more normal. And like, even when it comes to, like, for example, being promiscuous, like, I get to do what I want with who I want. It's, you know, my body, my choice, and blah 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 blah. And like you explain the consequences of that, and it's like, oh yeah, like once you kind of have that conversation, the that initial feeling sort of wears off.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because you can guide them through that because you know what it is they're experiencing, because you've possibly, most probably, felt it yourself. Whereas someone that's coming from a background where that isn't strange to them, or they think it is normal because they've just been born in it, they see any reaction like that as an attack, not just on Islam, but even on themselves. Like, you feel like that, but I don't. And because I don't feel like that, and I can't relate to that feeling in any way, you must think I am, you know, bad because of it. And then it's you see sort of animosity arise between these different groups because of the culture clash, because they just have two different upbringings. Whereas the revert can bridge that gap. The revert is someone who has experienced that and overcome it, and gone through that process. So yeah,
I agree, definitely. And it's a great point. Well, I think you know, thank you so much for being here and talking to me this morning. And hopefully maybe in the future we'll catch up again in some other setting, and talk about different topics. But thank you again, Yusuf, for stopping by and chatting with me. And hopefully,
thank you for inviting me.
Yeah.
Jazakallah khair for having me on.
Yeah, definitely. And I'll be happy to stay in touch for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Inshallah.